Hello, people of the internet. I hope you're doing very well. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Odur Jagero, and this is Dialogues with Jagero. I am going to be talking to a journalist. I'm going to be talking to a writer about the issue of fatherhood. I grew up with my father. Even though it was not perfect, I still don't know what it feels to grow up without a father. And I have friends around me that have grown without fathers. And so I've always wanted to talk to somebody about the feeling of not having a father. And I saw your beautifully done documentary on the BBC. And I thought, I want to speak with this lady. And then turns out you're my friend on Facebook. When you are doing the documentary, I don't think you are saying your full names, right?
I think I did at the beginning when I was introducing myself, and I think that was it.
Yeah.
Maybe once, yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people, it's a pain point for a lot of people. People are trying to find their parents. So first of all, I want to congratulate you for finding your father.
Thank you.
You know, and I think it was a beautiful thing. In fact, have you watched yourself just going into the vehicle? I don't know if you have. There's something there that you should go and look at again. When the old man is saying his goodbyes, you start going to the car, and then there is a moment there before you get into the car.
Yeah.
So I will ask you, the audience, to go and check it out. It's on BBC. I don't know how they will look for it.
If you go to YouTube and search for, it's called In Search of My Father.
In Search of My Father.
Yeah, you will find it. If you just search my name, I think it's the first thing that pops up. Yeah.
Because your name is, you told me I can call you Kabo.
You can call me Kabo. You can call me Namu. Yes.
And the full one?
It's Namukabo.
Namukabo.
Yeah.
Werungah. Oh, great. Thank you very much for agreeing to come to this dialogue.
Oh, it's really an honor.
Yeah,
it's really. I'm really happy to be here.
You know, I'm not going to say that I feel the idea of not having a father. I felt the idea of being an orphan because my dad died just immediately after my Form 4, and then my mother soon after. And then I came to Nairobi. When I came to Nairobi, I was basically an orphan, and life was very difficult for me as somebody who is parentless in the city.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and there were other problems around that. And when I was in church, people would come in as a family, and then people would go away as a family, and then I will make that long walk to where I was staying in Landimawe, you know. And I felt like, what would it have felt if I had my mother in this city? You know, what would I have felt if I had my father in the city? Even right now, I still, because now they are all passed on. There is that feeling when people talk about their parents and people talk about their mothers, and you know. So I've felt a little bit of that, but I can't imagine the young person not feeling like where is my father? So perhaps to start this chat, I would like us to go back to your childhood. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Cherangani, Kitale, at a small village called Makindu on the slopes of Cherangani Hills. But so that's really not where I was conceived. It's where I was born, because when my mother met my father, she was living with her elder sister in Baringo, and she left there pregnant. So my formative years, I lived there for I think about 3 years, and then I went to Nakuru, where I was living with my aunt, the elder sister. I started school there. I lived there for I don't know, maybe about 2 3 years, because no 2 years, because that's where I did my preschool. Then I went back to the village where I continued living with my grandmother and my mother. So when I was living with my aunt, the bits, I don't know if I knew she wasn't my mother, but one of the things that I remember when I think at that point I knew, but I just didn't understand it very well. Because growing up, before I left to go live with my aunt, living with my grandparents and my mom was very young, and other people in the home, I remember I used to call my mom by her name. And at this one time, I'm shouting her name, and my grandfather says, "Don't call her that. That's your mother. Call her mom." And I think maybe that's when I started to realize, oh, there's something called mom. I think at that point, I didn't know anything about parenthood or mother, father. I honestly don't know what was happening, because nowadays I see, parents fussing over, oh, my baby said mommy, my baby said daddy. I don't know. I don't know if I had those moments. But when I went to live with my aunt, I think I was so integrated into the family. I used to call her mom. But
I want to go back a little bit about when you're growing up with your mother and your and your grandmother.
Yeah.
Naturally, it is very easy to know this is my mom. I'm wondering why it was so difficult for you. Because was she not calling you child? I don't know.
I think part of the reason is because my grandmother was very possessive of me, and I'm told that she pretty much, took over all the responsibility, and she started co-sleeping with me when I was, I think, 3 months old or something. So even when I was about, 2 years or maybe 3 years old and I'm able to talk and all that, there were just so many people in my life. She's there doing everything. My mom is there also doing everything. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know if it was just a whole community of people.
Yeah.
And being the only child at that time in that compound, I was the only child. All the other people were grown up and all that. So I don't know if that was the confusion, or maybe I was just too young. I don't know why that didn't... why I didn't realize that. But all I know is that I was drawn to her. If I needed something, she's the first one I'd call. So maybe subconsciously I knew, like, this is the person who's supposed to nurture me or something like that. Yeah.
Then you went to your auntie.
Then I went to live with my auntie, started school there. Not actually started, continued. I had started in the village, then I went to live with my auntie. And
so your auntie is living in a town?
In Nakuru. My auntie was living in Nakuru at that time. She was a high school teacher, and she had 2 children, boys. So I'm in between them, my older cousin and my younger cousin, really just by a few months. And I was so integrated into that family. Like, up until today, I think there are people who we lived with in Nakuru who still think that they have a sister, and I have them as my brothers. But this thing usually just get out, because I remember one time we were playing out. It was an estate, and then this child told me, that's not your mom. And I actually went and asked her, so you're not my mom? And she was like, but your mom. I mean, I think even her, she hadn't realized that this is a conversation that maybe needs to happen, that I might be a little bit confused or something like that. But I think now that's when I started to realize that actually this is not my home. This is not my mom. But I wasn't treated, any different. She was a very loving, gracious lady. Yeah.
It is interesting that, well, you later know that you don't have a father. Why do you think they were taking you to Nakuru though?
Whew. I honestly, I think it was because there was opportunity there for good education. My village back then only had public schools. Like literally, there was no private school. And public schools back then, I think if I had actually started going to a public school and we were learning under a tree and using sticks to write and all sort of things. So I think first was for me to get better education. Um, I don't want to believe that was the main reason why I had to go to Nakuru. I don't know if there were other reasons. Yeah.
I don't know if there were other reasons.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Nakuru. Where do you go to school in Nakuru?
I started at that time it was called CPK. Right now it's SEK. So CPK Academy. I did preschool there, and we had this thing where because it was just purely preschool, and then you had to select your primary school. And I remember we picked schools and all that, and I think I was supposed to go to Harambe Khalsa primary school. That's where my other cousins went, and later transferred to other schools. But after preschool, I had to go back to Kitale. Living with my grandmother. I was supposed to join class 1, and my grandmother, in all her wisdom, decided, you have done, is it 2 years of preschool? Why are you going to class 1? So she took me to class 2. So I skipped class 1.
Yeah?
Yeah. So I went back to the village. I lived with my grandmother and my mom. And my grandfather. My grandfather was polygamous, so sometimes he was there, sometimes he wasn't there. He had 2 families. Class 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then I went to boarding school. Yeah.
Boarding school far away?
Far away. I went to a school in Western called Misihu Girls Primary School. And I think when I went to boarding school, that's when I actually started feeling the impact of not knowing who my father is, or something like that. I think growing up in the village, I don't know about other villages, but I think there just wasn't so much conversation about fathers and all that. And even going to school, I don't remember if we ever had any parents' day in that school. So you're just going to school, meeting with your teachers, and interacting with students there. Then I go back home to my loving home with my grandmother, my mother, my grandfather, sometimes my aunts, and all that. So it was kind of shielded. But when I went to boarding school, and also I had my uncles. One of my uncle was very instrumental, passed on about 5 years ago. So there was also, that, like male figure, my grandfather and my uncles. But when I went to boarding school, I remember when I was going to do the interview to join the school, my uncle took me. And we were supposed to do an English test, mathematics, and Swahili. And for English, you're also supposed to write a composition. And the composition was about write about your mother and father. I don't know what I wrote, but I remember thinking, okay, so my mother and father. And at that time, when you're told write about this and this, you don't think about imaginative. Right now, it's supposed to be imaginative. They just want to test your language, your understanding, and all that. So you can literally write anything. But at that age, you've been asked by your teacher to write something, and that means you're supposed to write the truth, write what you know. But I actually have no idea. I don't know anything about this man. And to be honest, I don't remember what I wrote. But I know I wrote a composition. I don't remember, but I know I struggled. I must have written a lot about my mother because, of course, I knew my mother very well. But I think that is the first time I started feeling absence of a father in my life. And then now, being in boarding school, sometimes, parents visiting, you see, mom, dad, they have come, there's a picnic.
The way they sit on the grass and
sit on the grass and
take out the chapati,
the chapati and everything. Yeah. And even when you're interacting with, now these are people from outside your village, from all over. That school actually had people from all over. I think it was a good school. I think it still is. And then someone is talking about, my dad. And when that conversation starts, when people are talking about their dads, you actually don't have anything to say. So you keep quiet. And I also remember there were so many compositions about writing. I think class 5, 6, and maybe even class 7, writing about your family, write about your nuclear family, write about your father, there were so many compositions. And in most cases, I really struggled with those. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have a conversation with any member of the family, or of your family, or the teachers, or what are some of the things that were going on in your head? Did anybody ever ask you, how about your dad? Because then when people were coming and having a picnic, who was coming? Who was representing you?
My grandmother. My grandmother would come carrying everything. And so, of course, after that, also my dad came today. My dad brought this. My dad brought that. So it wasn't that there wasn't anybody coming. It's just that you realize that, other people are being visited by their dad. And even those sons who are not being visited by their dad, they actually know something about them. Either they're dead, or they just know maybe he's not responsible, but they have information about them. But I didn't have any information, and I never had this conversation with anyone. I never asked questions. I was a very easy child, very obedient, very disciplined. I didn't ask questions, and I think even when you're young, you kind of just sense the questions that would make people uncomfortable, or that would seem rude, or something like that. So I didn't ask these questions. I didn't ask my teachers. I didn't ask my family until much later. Yeah.
Still in school? Still what in this school that we're talking about?
No, that was primary school. I finished primary school, and I think as I grew up, I found ways to maneuver such questions about your father, and if you need to write about it, I think I found ways. I'd talk about my uncles, or my grandfather. I went to high school, and it was the same thing. The person who took me to high school was again my late uncle, and he attended, I think, all the parents meeting and anything pertaining to school. A lot of people in that school really think that he was my father, but he wasn't. But what I can say is that going through primary school and high school, I wasn't comfortable telling people that I do not know who my father is. So I came up with stories. I would.
But you realized he was not in the picture.
Oh yeah, of course. I knew. I knew he wasn't in the picture.
Without anybody telling you, somebody telling you forthright that you don't have a father. We don't know where he is.
Yeah, nobody had to tell me that. Nobody told me that. I just knew he wasn't in the picture. And by the time you reach high school, you kind of actually just know that this person is not in the picture. I do not know who he is. The people that I consider my father are not my biological father, much as they are stepping up. And stepping up they did.
It's interesting, Namu, that you just know that you just know that my father is not here and nobody has said anything about it, but you just know. Why do you think so? You just know. Because what I'm struggling with is that nobody is telling you, nobody's talking about it, and you just know.
Well, much as nobody is telling me and nobody is talking about it, you kind of learn that your mother's brother is your uncle. So this is my uncle. This is not my biological father. You know that your mother's father is your grandfather. So you learn this is not my father. This is my grandfather. But you also know that you're supposed to have two parents, but there's one who is not there. I don't know if I had gotten answers if I had asked questions, because I did have a lot of questions. I just didn't ask.
Yeah.
So I think just you keep learning as you grow out of childhood, into teenagehood and all that. You learn these things. You know about how children are born, how a family setup is. So you know that this person is not here, and I have no information about him.
Yeah.
And for me, growing up in the village, if these things happened in the village, like you got pregnant by a neighbor's child and all that, people will always know that, that is the father. So you will get information when you're playing out with other children and all that. I have many friends who tell me, for them, they actually just found out when they were playing. Like, you're playing and then there's a man passing and then someone points, oh, that is your dad,
That is not nice.
Yeah, I actually have a friend who told me that she found out that her teacher is her biological dad.
Her teacher.
Her teacher. And she found out this, I think, when she was in about, class 7 or 8. So this man had been teaching this girl, knowing that he's the biological dad, but he wasn't, no indication, no nothing. And just the way I'm telling you, like, they were just having a conversation with her peers, and then someone said, oh, by the way, my mom said that teacher so-and-so is your dad. And then she's like, huh? What is happening here? So that's how she actually found out who her dad is. So my point here is when the pregnancy has happened in that setting, you kind of get this information. Even if it's not from your family, there are people around there who will know and will tell you. But for me, because it happened far, my mom only came back pregnant, nobody had any information. And I think that is why it took very long for me to actually find this information. Yeah.
And then high school, of course, comes to a close. Then you go to university, or is it what kind of tertiary education was it?
Yeah, so I completed high school. I got admitted at Kenyatta University to study education, English and literature. I think I was gonna go take it because at that time, I mean, that's what that's what you've been offered. But my family didn't like that idea, and I remember them telling me that we have too many teachers in this family. We don't want, more teachers. So the idea was for me to go study in the US, and I actually got admission and everything, but I was denied a visa. So after 2 attempts to get that visa, like, okay, fine. So this is not happening. And that's how I joined USIU to study journalism. But after high school, in that period, of transiting high school to campus, I had that conversation with my mother for the first time. It wasn't a conversation. I just asked her, so who is he? And she told me the name, and told me the place where he came from, and told me the profession. It wasn't the right profession, but she told me the profession. So the name, the place where he came from, and the profession. And I think it was also during that period that I overheard some of my aunties.
This is you at USIU?
Before joining USIU, that period that I've finished high school and now I'm planning to join campus. I also overheard my aunties talking about it. They were like, said something like, huyu alikuwa polisi, sahii he must be ranking very high in the, you know, in the police. So that's how I gather that this man was a policeman. It turned out that he wasn't. Was a policeman, and I found out his name and where he came from. And I think I was also told the tribe, but then again, it wasn't the right tribe. Yeah. So, and then I joined
USIU.
I joined USIU, and still, even at this point, I still wasn't so comfortable talking about telling people that I do not know who my father is. I don't know why I felt that it was a shameful thing to say, but I just didn't. I didn't tell people. And I think in campus, especially when you're living in the hostels, because I resided in a private hostel at USIU, I think nobody really bothers to ask you that much, unless you volunteer. Of course, there are those people who talk about, my dad. But for me, I've avoided that kind of conversation. I just keep quiet or not say anything.
But what is happening? What is happening inside of you, even though you don't talk about it?
There are many
because
questions.
Right now, I remember you've already been told a name.
I've been told a name.
You have a profession.
I have a profession, and there was Facebook.
There was Facebook.
There was Facebook. So what I did is I decided, when I asked my mother that question, I had actually decided that maybe I should look for this person just to find out who he is and all that. So when I was given the name and where he possibly comes from, there was the financial...
This is which year?
It must have been 2012 or 2011. Yeah, around that time. So first of all, you realize that it actually requires resources for you to
track down someone.
Because my initial idea was like, I'll go to Busia, because I was told that's where he came from, and look for him. But I don't even know the name of the village.
Yeah,
I don't know anything. But now with Facebook, I realized that there's actually an opportunity to find him through that, because I have a name. So what I did is I would type his name and try to, look at the people who match the name and all that. I think I even reached out, I reached out to some of them, asking them, do you know so-and-so? He was a police. Do you know so-and-so? He was a police. So again, I was sharing wrong information because he wasn't a police. So even the people that I was asking, there are those who would respond, and there are those who many didn't respond, because literally anybody who matched the name, I reached out to them. I think so. There are those who responded, there are those who...
How many do you think there were?
There weren't many, because again, the name is not very popular. But must have been more than maybe 15. I don't know. So I was literally stalking people on Facebook. So there are those who responded, there are those who didn't respond. But then those who responded actually just said, no, I don't. So I never got any positive feedback from that. So I was doing this, but you're not putting in a lot of effort. Maybe one time thank you so much. Maybe one time you're bored, you're like, okay, let me do this. So you do, you're so psyched, you search for names, you do all those things, you get a negative feedback, and then you move on. I mean, this would happen in intervals of years. I'm not talking about that I was doing this week, next week, or this month, next month. It would be years apart, So, and also, so nothing actually ever materialized from that. But I think it's because I wasn't, you're keen, but you're not so keen, eh?
How about the men that you see, the father-like figures that you see on crossroads, along alleyways, in town, everywhere you are seeing father figures? What?
I honestly, I hope people will not attack me, but I do not walk in town and see men and think father figure.
Yeah.
I don't see that. I just see men walking in town.
Yeah.
I just see, honestly, that's what I see. I see men walking in town. The only time I'd look at a man and see a father figure is when I see or experience his interaction with his children. That's the only time I see father figures, and I started experiencing this quite early, even in primary school. You know, the men who'd come to visit their children and how they interacted with them. I'll never forget this man who would come and hug his daughter and kiss her on the forehead. So much as I had father figures, you know, my uncles, fantastic men, we didn't have that kind of interaction. So it was very odd for me seeing a man actually hugging and kissing his daughter. And I think that was the first picture I got of, you know, this must be a wonderful man. And he was a wonderful man because the daughter turned out to be, you know, very confident, fantastic. So another thing, maybe we'll talk about it later, is that how, you know, this whole thing affected me, self-esteem and all that. Probably talk about it later. But where were we? Were talking about me, you know, trying to search for him. So that didn't materialize. But you know, when you join campus, your mind opens up and you start to actually discover yourself. You start being, you know, self-aware and all that. So one thing that I stopped doing is I stopped feeling ashamed of saying that I do not know who my father is. So I started saying it. If someone would ask me, I would say I have no idea who he is. And of course, as I also progressed, I would just explain, if I needed to, why I do not know who he is. Sometimes those questions come. And this continued, like literally that was the only effort I made to look for him. Facebook, to look for him.
Like you said, it needed resources.
It needed resources, but it also needed maybe a little bit more effort or something like that. Yeah. So this
who is bankrolling your entire education? Your education from the boarding school to USIU.
My family. So one of my uncle was paying my school fees. Another uncle was in charge of my upkeep and pocket money. And yeah, so that's just how it was. So they would come together and finance whatever needed to be financed. There's one uncle, of course, who took the bulk of the school fees, and this is just because he was in a better position to do it. And my uncle, the one who died 5 years ago, he took care of my accommodation, and honestly, that was a huge sacrifice for him, and that's why I believe that he loved me unconditionally. And I don't want to talk about him because I'll start crying.
You can.
I don't. No.
You see, so what I want to ask. So very interesting that you have 3 uncles.
I have 3 uncles,
and each one of them is doing a specific thing towards your education.
Everybody contributed. Everybody, not just education, like my welfare. Everybody, and also my aunt. You remember my aunt that I talked to?
Yes, the one in Nakuru.
The one in Nakuru. So everybody had a role, and my aunt, she would take care of shopping and all that. But she also has like other responsibilities. 2 children in campus as well, and all that. But she was very much she was very instrumental when it comes to now planning, like, so this is what is needed here, so you're bringing this, this is how.
It's interesting because what's something that's very interesting to me is that, for example, there's one that was taking care of your pocket money. If you lacked pocket money, how would you know? Because you are not in a meeting when they were discussing who does what. How would you now know that this is the person that is supposed to be taking care of pocket monies, and ask them that, Uncle Niko chini?
I would ask anybody, really.
Oh, yeah?
And if the person that I'm asking does not have, they would ask the other person to send. Yeah. But that's pretty much how I operated. If I lacked something, I would ask. Mostly, I would ask my late uncle, and if he had, he would send. If he doesn't have, he would ask anybody else to send. So that would be either of the 2 uncles. Yeah.
So this one that you would ask, you think that you're going to them because they were the one that you thought were very close and you had a rapport with? Because I feel like that is sometimes how it happens, that it is easier to talk to this person, even though the other person's the other person is not good, but the rapport.
Yes. So I would say I definitely had a very good rapport with him. I was very close to him, and that is because of the 3 uncles, he's the one I spent the most time with. He's the one who was at home most of the time. He was a teacher when I was younger, he was a teacher at a nearby school. So he's the one that, like, kind of nurtured me. And even when he was transferred to Turkana, which is quite far from home, he's still the one who was there most of the time, because during school holidays, he was there at home. So we had a very strong bond. We had a very close relationship. My other uncle, one of my other uncles left the country when I was in class 7. And he has lived abroad all through. Well, that's not to mean that we are not close. We are actually we are friends. We are very, very good friends. I think because of living abroad and having like more exposure and all that, so we kind of have those conversations about relationships, sex and all that.
It's amazing how the whole community or the whole family will rally behind a child that is parentless or having no parent, and just try and help them over the line.
I must say that I have been very lucky. I know for sure this doesn't happen for everyone. I was just lucky to be born to this family who loved me and still loves me very much. I know there are many people who do not have that kind of privilege or who have not experienced that. You have been born maybe out of wedlock and all that, and you have able family members and relatives, but they're not willing to help. So it doesn't happen for everyone, and I do not take it for granted. I know for sure that I was lucky to be born in that family. Yeah.
Big up to your uncles and the people that were around you during this time.
Yes.
And still are, behind you. You finished school.
So I finished school, and I finished school, yes. But by the time I was finishing school, I had joined NTV. I joined as an intern, and then I was taken in as a reporter. And I remember, so at this time, I'm actually comfortable talking about, who I am. If somebody asks me about my father, I tell them I have no idea who he is. There has always been this, a lot of people have always assumed that one of my uncles is actually my biological father, because he's been quite in the media space or something. He's a security expert and analyst. So a lot of people actually thought that he is my biological father. And I remember when I joined NTV, there was that perception from some of my colleagues, because we share the surname, and for some reason I kind of almost look like like him.
Same family.
It's same family. I mean, I'll talk about this later, but I think one of the things that shocked me when I met my biological father was that I actually have his face. I didn't expect that because I look a lot like my mother's family, so I didn't expect that I'd look like him. But yeah, so when I joined NTV, I remember one of my colleagues, they wanted to talk to him about something to do with security. And then he came to me and was like, can you give me your dad's number? I want to talk to him. And I was like, I know you're asking about so-and-so. Here is the number, but he's actually not my dad. He's my uncle. And I was like, you guys look so much alike. So is he your dad's brother? I was like, no, he's actually my mother's brother. Then the next question, the obvious question would be, so why do you share your surname? Because ideally, you're supposed to take your dad's surname. But I was using, surname from my mother's side. So I was like, okay, he's not my dad. He's my mother's brother. And whatever. So I don't know who my dad is. That's why I'm using.
You say that now you're starting to talk about it boldly. Then I remember uko nyuma when you were talking, you talked about the shame of not wanting. Do you know where you trace this shame to? Even if it was not in your case, but why do people shy away, or even people right now that are struggling to know their dads? I mean, one person turned me down and told me that I can't speak publicly about my father,
I had quite a shielded childhood, but you can never shield a child 100%. Even in the family, there will always be maybe 1, 2, 3 people. Even if it's an extended relative, a distant relative, there will always be 1 or 2 people who will throw in a word. And as a child, the things that you hear as a child kind of stick to you. I think when you grow old, and then character development and all that, your brain starts to to forget things. But you don't forget the things that you were told as a child. So much as my close family was very protective of me and all that, we were not living in an island. We would interact with other people. We'd interact with neighbors and even extended family. And you would hear things like, huyu hata hatujui babake ni nani, na huyu babake anakuanga nani. You would hear such things. So, and of course, the way people are saying it, they are saying behind you kind of notice that they're actually saying it in a secretive way. You just happened to overhear. You were not meant to hear, and there's some people who were not. Your mother was not meant to hear, or maybe your grandmother was not meant to hear. So you realize that there's something odd about it, and which I think in your young mind or something, it translates to shame. It's something that is not supposed to be out there in the public, because if people are saying things in secret, it means it's not something that is supposed to be said publicly. It's a shame, So I think maybe that's how I associated it with shame. And it took me a long time to realize that these were just irresponsible people, or people maybe who didn't know better, who are talking about this. So yeah, I had a loving family, but I wasn't 100% protected. I would hear these things from neighbors and other family members. Yeah.
Then you are at NTV.
So I'm at NTV and I'm having that conversation with a former colleague. And so when I tell him that I do not know who my father is, he actually gets curious and asks more questions. And because at this time, I'm actually not ashamed of it anymore, I tell him, so this is what I know. And he was actually the first person who said, I think we should do a story. I mean, I think we should do a story on that. And journalists, we are like hawks.
Yeah.
You're looking for every opportunity to
Yes.
find a unique story. So of course I didn't take up that idea at that time. But yeah, that's how even some I just started to tell people openly that this is who I am. So fast forward, I joined the BBC, and at this time I'm like, okay, I think I have a little bit more resources in terms of finances, so I think I should get serious. I would actually I would actually set it as one of my resolutions for the new year.
Every year?
Every year for so many years.
Every year for so many years.
For so many years.
Like this year, it is my dad time.
This year, I'm going to look for this.
Time.
This year will not, and I have to know who this man is. Yeah, so, and I think, I've joined the BBC. I have a little bit more resources in terms of money and all that. You have a car, at least you can drive, whatever, you can, just those kind of logistics. So I decide, okay, fine, I need to look for this person. And because
you're at the BBC for how long? For 4 years?
I was at the BBC for almost 5 years. 5 years, actually. But this started, I think it was, I don't know whether it was my second year there. No, actually the first year there. I had maybe just a few months into. So what do? I try to do research again, using, of course, right now things have advanced, research tools are there, social media tools to search for people. I have, more knowledge on how to use these tools and all that. So again, I start to dig, just trying to see if I can get any information, but nothing was coming up.
You still go back to Facebook?
First, Facebook was one of it, because then again it has the most numbers of people. Yeah, and it's actually the place that I got most name, similar name. And I think I actually found one of my relative, but I think he didn't respond or something when I reached out to him. At that point, I didn't know he was my relative. I was just reaching out to someone who had a similar name. So I decide, because it looks like I'm really not getting any information. But now looking back, it's because I didn't have the correct information. And all this time, I have never gone back to my family to ask any more questions. Because then again, maybe we'll talk about this later. It's never an easy conversation. So I said, with this information that I have is actually enough. I thought it was enough. So I decided to talk to another colleague of mine.
At the BBC?
At the BBC. I wanted to get a private investigator to do the work, because I'm not getting any answers, and I don't want to just. So my idea was that for them to just find him and give me the information, and then I'll know what to do. So he did give me a contact, but I never reached out. I don't know why. But he also just said the same thing. He was like, why? This can make a good story. Why don't we just do it as a story? I didn't want that, but I also didn't reach out to the private investigator. But now I started thinking about it in terms of a story. I started, reading about people who have gone searching for their fathers. I started reading about the impact of, fatherhood to children, and just parenthood in general to children. I started, just gathering more information, and even reaching out to people and asking them, would you be willing to share your story? So my idea was to just what I did, like follow a journey of someone who's trying to search for their father, understand the motivation behind it, and also understand how their lives were affected because of not having a father, a biological father, in whatever form that is to them. I did find quite a lot of people in similar situation. A lot of people. I'd be referred to like someone, they refer me to someone, they refer me to someone. So it's like snowballing. You're getting people, but no one was actually willing to do that.
To go search for their father.
No, there were those who were willing to go. Actually, a lot of them were willing to go search, but because I wanted this to be a story and it would mean that it's going to be out there in the limelight, that's what they didn't want.
Yeah.
They wanted to do it, but do it privately. So, of course, we'd have that conversation. I'd wish them well, because there's nothing more I can do. The only way that would be a story if you agree to tell that story, and if you invite us to to follow that journey. So I did that for quite some time, and I didn't find anyone.
Like no one wanted to go.
No one.
Everybody wanted to see their father, but no one wanted them to be on TV.
No one wanted to be on TV, and no one actually.
Do you think it is because of the shame that we're talking about? What if we don't? What if?
It is a cocktail of things. But for many, because I was reaching out to now grown-up people. Most of them were over 30, maybe late 20s. And the biggest fear for all of them, I would say, is how it would affect either their mother or their guardian or just their family, the people who have brought them up. And that is a real fear. Even for me, that was a real fear. Like, how are they going to take it?
And you see now, Namu, and this is the part that I don't understand. Probably you'll help me understand it. Because, like, for example, my friend, he says that he has begged his family to tell him the truth. But then on the flip side, he's also thinking about what the family will say.
Yeah.
If you were to go back, because so now my question is, why do you worry so much about this? Is something that is affecting you as a person. It is your story. It is you. So why is it that? Why are you stuck on how these other people will feel?
I wouldn't say it is being stuck, or maybe it is, but it is a valid concern. Because when you start asking these questions, or when you decide that you are going to look for this person, this thing is very personal. It's only you understand why you are doing it. You might be doing it because of identity issues. You might be doing it out of curiosity. But for the people who are in your life, it looks, it in most cases just appears like a defiance, and also it can also affect how they perceive their ability as being the other parent in your life. Like, for instance, if you started asking your mother about your father, saying that you want to go look for them, they might start questioning, was I not enough? Did I give them like the perfect life? What were my shortcomings? And if it's not that, you don't know how the relationship was. You don't know how you were conceived. You don't know the circumstances under which you were conceived. So it's also triggering emotions in them. Maybe this person abandoned them. Maybe it was a one-night stand. Maybe they actually have no information, and you're asking this difficult question that they have been avoiding. But it could also be, for me personally, my biggest fear was that these people have given so much. They have stepped in every way. And now here I am telling them that I want to go look for for my biological father, it does seem like I'm being ungrateful. I'm not appreciating the fact that despite the fact that he wasn't there, they stepped up and they have done the very best for me. So again, of course, this is usually your fear within, and sometimes it's valid, because I know of cases where people asked these questions and it actually turned out very ugly. When I was looking for people to now, when I decided to now feature myself in this story, I still wanted to feature other people, so that, to bring out the fact that there are many people who are going through this thing. And I reached out to a lot of people. And one of the person that I reached out had actually gone through that journey. And we just wanted him to come on board and share his motivation, because he did that when he was in his late 40s. He had lived for more than 4 decades without knowing who his father is, but he still wanted to look for him. He didn't need him in any way. And he refused, because after he went on that journey, it actually affected his relationship with his mother. So these concerns are valid. And I don't know for other people, but for me, I consider how my actions will affect other people. And I try to, see things from their perception. So for me, my fears were not actually valid, because I'd not had that conversation. I just actually felt that maybe this is how they would feel, but my family was actually very supportive of that. But just to answer, I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, and I have a follow-up. A follow-up. This is not a question. This is what you would say to people that, to parents, guardians, to mothers and fathers, that this person is coming to you, that they need to know their mother. They are coming to you that I need to know my father. What would you tell these guardians that probably would be asking themselves, were we not enough?
I always refrain from giving advice and all that, but what I would say is that in most cases, almost 100%, it is not about you as a parent. It is not about your abilities as a parent. And of course, there might be emotions there. There's a past, there's maybe a Pandora's box that is about to be opened. But it is extremely necessary for this person who is seeking these answers, because what I realize is that many people don't realize how growing up without a father or not knowing who your father is affects your life. A lot of people don't, because it's not some kind of a wound or some kind of a condition that you walk with. And especially if maybe you have been a little bit, I don't want to use the word successful, but if your life seems like it's going on well. For me, my life seemed everything is going on well. I have gone to school. I have a good job. Why am I doing this? But there are very fundamental issues that comes with you not knowing who your father is. And for me, at the point when I embarked on that journey, it had to do with identity. But it also had to do with the fact that, one of the ways that I was affected by, him not being there is that even when you have all this support, you have this village of people who have your back and all that. For me, I grew up knowing that I do not have plan B. I do not have a backup. If I mess up, I have nowhere to go, because these are not my parents. These people are not doing this because they have to. They are actually doing it because they are good people but they're not. It's not their duty to do that. So I felt like I've just been given, like this one opportunity to work with it, and if it doesn't work, I do not have anywhere to go. And in campus, and even in high school, people would get pregnant, and they would go back home, and give birth and go back to school. And of course, situations are different. There are those, of course, who had difficulties with their parents and all that, and with their dads and all that, but still you had somewhere to go. And there are those who actually get support from their father. But for me, I felt I cannot do this. Sina backup, sina nyumbani, sina mtu mwenye naita I call dad. So I cannot dare mess. And I think that's a lot of pressure on someone. It's a lot of pressure to feel like, if I don't do this, my life is gonna end. I don't know what would have happened if I had, messed up and all that. Of course, right now I'm old enough. If I decided to get pregnant or decided to not finish school, or just, I can make my own decisions right now. But back then, I just felt like, hauna backup. You do not have anyone, hauna kwenyu, because then again, some of the things that you hear when you're growing up is that this is not your home. Hapa si kwenyu, hapa ni kwa kina mama yako. And, you do not have a place to call home. I mean, it's your home, but traditionally, it's not your home.
Yeah.
So, and for me, that was a lot of pressure. One of the, biggest pressures of my life. So people don't realize this. And sometimes because it takes a lot of perception, it takes a lot of introspection for you to, to know these things.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that just have that conversation, however way it goes, just have that. It's a difficult conversation, but have it. Be open. But I also know that right now things are really different. Parents now are more open to having this conversation with their children. Well, I know some people might disagree.
A lot.
But I but I think things are a little bit different. There are more parents who are open to have this conversation, but also children are more bolder. Gen Z and all that, they ask those difficult questions, which for me is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We go to now how you plan this. How does it all start?
So now I have failed to secure someone who's willing to share their story, to do that, to follow that journey. If you watched my story, you realize that I talked to 2 other people. One of them was actually my colleague.
At the restaurant.
And for him, he doesn't want to know anything. So of course, we weren't going to do that journey with him. And for the other one, she knew who the dad is, only that he isn't a present dad. So now we have decided that I'm gonna do this.
Yeah. The family is notified.
Not yet. Not yet. So the editor who took up the story was actually very excited about it. But then again, it's a very emotional story. So we had a sit down and conversation about it, and it was decided that because I am going to be the story,
The subject, yes.
The subject, I need to be detached from that story.
Meaning what?
Meaning, I will not be involved in research and everything, and also for the story to be authentic. Everything that you saw on that film was 100% authentic. There was no script. There was
You are not
nothing.
a journalist in that story.
I wasn't. Actually, that is the thing. I had to be treated as a contributor from outside. So this means that I wasn't involved in the research for that story. I didn't.
You were a consultant.
I wasn't even a consultant. I wasn't
you'd
even
show
a
them where you're
consultant.
homing.
So this is how it happened. When
Yeah.
we agreed that we are going to do this story, I gave them the information that I had. And that is the name, the profession that I thought was the profession, and what? And the place.
And the tribe, tribe and place.
And the tribe, which actually turned out to be wrong. So, and they started doing research and everything, just trying to see if, first of all, you have to see if there's a story, because if this person cannot be found, it means that we actually do not have a story.
Really?
Yeah,
you can end it. You can end it. Honestly, now I think a story can have
it would have happened.
It can have a tragic end. Nothing to be ashamed of.
It would have happened, but I think either way, research needed to be done.
Yes.
So we did a little
for sure.
So we did a little bit of research. I don't know why I'm saying we. I didn't do any of that. So they did everything. And then we started the journey. And when I was starting that journey, I actually had no idea whether the person is there or not. I was starting very green, no idea, nothing. So, of course, we followed the journey. We went to Baringo, came back to Nairobi, went to the village and all that. But one of the things is when they were trying to find this and everything, it became very difficult. The same way I was doing research and not getting anything, so they were also not getting anything.
Because in the movie it appears to have been done in a very short time and very easily.
That thing took more than a year.
No.
We only cut it down to those few.
A year.
Yeah, that thing took almost a year, actually. Yeah,
meaning there is a lot of footage.
Oh, there's a lot of footage, and there's. But I think the thing that took the most was the research. Because so again, trying to find, because even when you're going to look for someone, but where are you going to look for them? You kind of need to have some information, and that is where I was removed, because they needed to find that information to see where I would go and all that. Of course, we were still gonna go to Busia, but then after Busia, where else are we going? So this is now when they had to bring in my family. And this is when I actually found out. So I found out, the other information, that he wasn't a policeman, and he was in the army, and all that. Then we went back to doing research. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty and all that. But that 25-minute thing that you saw took very long time. There were times when we actually wanted to give up. There was a time where we had actually given up because we found a wrong person.
Oh my God.
The person was dead. The person that we had found was dead. So we assumed this guy died.
Really?
And then we stopped.
And then you stopped, yeah?
So we actually thought, okay, fine. So it looks like this person is dead. And then now we got new information that the person you think, that's not the person. It's someone else. So we started it was a lot of work. And now,
during this time, you are still doing your own stories.
I'm still doing my own stories. I actually, I'm just going to work, because now I was told, don't do anything. And they were actually very specific. They were like, we know you're curious and we know you have the ability to get this information, but please do not do anything. We want this story to be as authentic as
So
possible.
you were just assigned other stories to do.
I was assigned other stories to do, just continuing with my work and, just doing my daily work and everything. So when now they felt like they had consolidated, they had found enough information, so we embarked on that journey, and now I came in again as a character, but also as the reporter. So I was telling my own story. Yeah.
At what point did you know that the gentleman has been found?
The day before I saw him.
Really?
Yeah, because so when we went to, as you saw in the film, we went to Baringo, looked at the records, there's nothing. Then I now had to bring in my family, ask them, so who, I mean, I'm trying to find this information, I can't find anything. Then my aunt, the one who was living with my mom, the one who told us, oh, you guys are looking at the wrong place. That guy was not a policeman, he was in the army, and he actually had just come there to do the project that was happening, and I think they left, he was in the engineers battalion and all that. So of course we continued, but so just following the journey, like this is where he was, this is the person who knows him, this person is telling us this is the last time they saw him, he was somewhere. Then the next person, we actually didn't include everyone in the film, but we talked to so many people.
And they were all filmed?
There's some who were filmed, there's some who were not. There were like 2 people who refused to be filmed. I think, not actually 2. There were like about 4 people who refused to be filmed because they gave the information. They're like, I'll give you the information, but I don't want to be filmed. Yeah. And it helped because now it would now take us to the next step. So went there, found an old man. He was actually Moi's, I think I don't know whether he's an elder brother or a cousin, the late president. He referred us to someone else, referred us to someone else, referred us to someone else, referred us to someone else. So we were just following the trail. Like, so, this person, when was the last time? Ni kitambo, but there's someone else, I think, or aneza mjua. So we would go. We talked to so many people. And eventually we found now one person who had the ability to dig deeper and give us the information.
This is in the film, the gentleman that you meet in the office, I think, that you tell, I'll give you a number.
Yes. That is now, I think he was the deputy for the school that that they had gone to do the construction. He's the one who led us now to the colonel, who now, opened all the. Yes. So actually you asked how, when I found out that this person might be alive. No, not he has been found, but all this time I wasn't, you're going into it not knowing whether you're going to find an alive man, a dead man, and all that. Like those were the options. He's either dead or alive. But I think the first time I realized that this man might be alive was when I had a conversation with the colonel, and he said, when you meet him, you will realize that you look a lot like him. Yeah. So in my head, I was like, it looks like he's alive. It's only that we don't know where he is right now. And then now later when I called him, and then he told me, so the man retired, he lives in Busia, this is the place, give me the address and everything. So that was the day before I headed to Busia, and that is now how I found out. Yeah.
Very, very emotional images.
It was chaos. I don't know if they put everything in that film.
I doubt. As a trained journalist, I could see that.
And they didn't. I don't think they put everything. It was chaos. That day was chaos. Because
I can only imagine.
Yeah, because going into that journey, I don't know what was in my head. I think I felt like maybe we will not reach this point because it had taken so long. So now I'm here and I'm presented with an opportunity to meet this person who I have not known for such a long time, and we've been searching him for more than a year. At some point we actually lost hope, and now I'm told, okay, so this is where he lives, so you go. And if I was not filming, ideally I would have taken his number and maybe talked to him whenever I felt like I was ready. But this was a documentary, so we have to film and everything. And also because we've already put in so much resources, so much time, you just can't start saying, okay, I don't want to do this now. But there were those moments. I almost refused to go. So it actually took a lot of support and patience from the crew. And we went. So I think this wasn't, and a lot of people actually ask me, people are curious about my first interaction with him, because whatever you saw on TV wasn't my first interaction with him, because again we could not ambush him with cameras and all that. We had to respect his privacy, so I had to go meet him first and ask for permission to film before we could go. Ask for permission to film. So that wasn't. It was still the same day, but it wasn't the first interaction. And one of the questions that people ask me is, how was it? So we went to Busia, and I was shown, I was with the crew and everything, and they told me, so that is the home. And I had to now go in. So we didn't want to go in as a crew, with, vehicles, cameras and all that.
He's not been notified?
So.
Don't answer that.
Why?
Go ahead.
So when we were doing the research, one of the things they did is that they contacted the military, trying to get information about him. So the military never got back to us, but apparently they called him. So they called him and told him that there's a young lady who's looking for you, says that you are the father, and something like that. And that was almost 6 months before I showed up that day.
Really?
Yeah. So all this time, and this he told me later, they had been wondering, when is this person showing up? Because the military never gave them my name or my number. That's what he says. He wasn't given any information. He was just told that, just be aware, there's a young lady who's looking for you, says you're the dad. So he had the conversation with his family, his lovely wife and the children. So now they were just, sitting and waiting. And at some point he actually thought, maybe these people were lying to me, because 6 months has passed and nobody...
But what is the military thinking? I mean, you are being asked something, you don't say, then you go ahead and tell the subject, and then you keep quiet.
I think because of, privacy and I think security. They weren't... It was a long shot, we knew. Even when we were asking, we knew it was a long shot for them to give us that information, much as he's retired. Because we had tried to I didn't even have any legal ground to ask, because I'm a grown-ass woman. I'm not a minor, seeking, a provision or anything. So I arrive and then I'm told, so go. So one of the things that I did is, when now we got the address and everything, I called an uncle of mine who's actually my age mate. We grew up together. He's my mother's cousin, and he lives he was the one who was close by. My first idea was the first thing that I wanted to do was to bring in my cousin who's in Nairobi. We are very close. We are like sisters. But I think she wasn't available. We actually wanted to fly her to Kisumu so that she comes to Bungoma and then we go together. So I called my uncle, and because he's in politics and it was around the campaign period, it was a long shot. That's why I didn't think of him first, because I knew they were they were campaigning and all that. But he was gracious enough to say, this is something big, this is heavy, so I think I need to be there for you. Because at that time, my greatest fear was like, I'm going to walk in there and this man is going to chase me away. And I knew I needed support. So he came and we went together. So I walked with him to the gate. And when we arrived there, he was there. My biological father was there. He was actually seeing some people off. So he was opening the gate for them and seeing them. So the one thing that I noticed is that he looked at me and he was startled. You know the way you look at someone and you're like, he was startled.
Something is going on.
Yeah. And he was almost mute. So we greeted him, he greeted us, and then he was like, Karibuni. And he had, I think the visitors who were leaving had been sitting under a tree because they had, put some seats under a tree, under shade. And because his compound is a little bit big, it's a long walk from the gate to that place. And we were walking there. This one was so quiet. And, it's not... si ile tu kunyamaza ati because these are strangers, I don't know what to do. It is that tense quiet because and he told me this, he just knew the moment he looked at my face, he just knew, okay, fine, that girl that they had been telling me about is here. So he was shocked, and he was trying to compose himself as we were walking to that to that place. It's not a long distance, but it was the longest
the longest distance for...
It was the longest walk of my life. And I think for him too. Because now for me in my mind, I looked at my face, at his face, and was like, this man looks really like me. But then again, I don't know if he's the one. This man looks like me, but I don't want to speculate. The one thing that I told myself is that I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to assume anything until the person confirms. So we are walking there, and I'm looking at him, and he's called Stan, my uncle. He's also looking at me, and kind of just smiling. I think even him, he just knew because the resemblance. I think you saw the photo.
Yeah.
The resemblance is just uncanny. So that was the longest walk. So I'm thinking, is it him? Is it his brother? Who's this person? So we went and sat down and kept quiet.
And everyone is quiet.
So everybody is just quiet. It was extremely, I don't want to say awkward, but I think it was funny. So we walked, and then he was karibu, kaeni chini tukakaa. And then I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, I'm looking at my uncle, he's looking at me, he's looking at him.
Somebody has to start a conversation.
Someone has to start a conversation, and nobody wants to start this conversation. And I had brought my uncle because he was supposed to, to kind of like, start that conversation. But I think even he's so shocked. He doesn't know what to do. So I think I started the No, he actually said, okay, sasa karibuni. So I asked him, we are looking for so and so. And then he was like, so and so is me. So that's when I confirmed that he's actually the one. Again, shock. So, okay, fine. You're here, you're sitting in front of me. And then I told him, I was actually very, very straightforward. My uncle keeps asking me, what was going through your mind that day? So I told him, this is who I am, this is my name, and this is my mother's name, and I think you're my father. And he was like, okay, karibu nyumbani. And then when he said karibu nyumbani, I was like, who reacts like this? So I asked him, why are you not shocked? Why are you just saying karibu nyumbani? And my uncle is looking at me like, where, those eyes like, where, what are you saying here? So I asked him, why are you not shocked? He was like, I am actually very shocked. It's only that as a man, I don't really have to show my emotions. But then he also said, I'm not surprised because I have kind of been waiting for you. I got information a while back that there's a young person there's a lady who's looking for me. And the moment I saw you at the gate, I knew it was you. So, welcome home. That's what he said. Yeah, and then of course I asked him, I grilled him. I don't know what was going through my mind, but he was very gracious. He answered all my questions. So I mean, all the questions that you would ask. Did you know about me? Do you remember my mom? Blah, blah, blah. All those things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Quite a wonderful story that ended also well. I think you should have, even if you didn't get him, that story should have been out.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Thank you very much, Namu, for coming to this podcast, Dialogues with Jagero, and talking to us about fatherhood. I think I know a lot of people out there will be interested in this story and the journey that you took. So thank you once again, and congratulations for finding your father.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And for you guys of the internet, thank you very much for joining. This was another good conversation about fatherhood. And please subscribe, please leave a comment, and until another video, thank you for now.